GM, and welcome. This is an amazing Thursday to learn with Alchemy about account abstraction. And yeah, this is a huge topic for the ecosystem because account abstraction is improving the user experience to have a seamless interaction with the Web3 ecosystem. And yeah, this is the first of a series of educational workshops with Alchemy's team and also with Offchain Labs team. And yeah, we'll have 5 of them. This is the first of 5. And yeah, we are going to have these ones every week, every Thursday. So yeah, super excited for this one. And we have Jason. Here we have as well Dan from Alchemy team and as well Austin from Offchain Labs. How are you, team? I would love to hear more about yourselves. Like maybe we can start with some introductions, like share about yourselves, your role, what do you do at Alchemy or Offchain Labs? Yeah, maybe we can start with you, Jason.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jason Windowie. I'm the protocol specialist here at Alchemy, and what that means on a day-to-day basis is I work with our interactions with standards and ecosystems, and really trying to sort of help drive the ecosystem forward.
Amazing, love it, Jason. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, today you tell me on backstage that you are turning 9 months here in Alchemy. So very exciting to see and celebrating with you.
Thank you. As of today. So.
Amazing. And we have Dan too. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so I kind of do a lot of technical education at Alchemy. I've been focused on Alchemy University largely since I joined Alchemy. Before that, I was doing an Ethereum developer bootcamp called ChainShot that was acquired by Alchemy. So a lot of the technical content that you see in Alchemy University started in ChainShot bootcamp and then moved over. More recently, I've been really diving into into account abstraction. A lot of A's. And so account abstraction, super excited to be here today. And I love talking about why this is such an important topic for devs and why there's a really great opportunity here for people to get into it. So yeah, super excited to dive into this discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Super excited too then. Thank you. And Austin, we have Austin too from Offchain Labs. What about you, Austin?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm on the product team at Offchain Labs. I work across several of our newer initiatives we're working on and spend a lot of time thinking about account abstraction and how it can not only make the user experience better, but also empower users to make better decisions and have better security.
Awesome. Yeah, we have amazing and talented people here today. And yeah, I would like to hear more about your thoughts on also if you can give an overview of this account abstraction series and why devs should be interested on this and why they should be start learning more about it.
Yeah, so I can jump into that. Just talk about the series a little bit more and so as Anna mentioned, we're gonna have 5 episodes on this. So today we're starting with the more high level overview of account abstraction. What we want to do here is hype you up for the following episodes and explain why you should care about this topic, especially if you're a developer in the ecosystem today. What kind of opportunities does it present? What kind of things can you build on account abstraction? That's really the purpose of the episode today, is building the Web3 of tomorrow. What does account abstraction unlock? And then we're going to be going more technical as the series progress. Episode 2, we're going to get a little bit more deep dive into account abstraction, specifically about 4337 and 6900, which are account abstraction standards. We'll talk about what those standards are a little bit more today. And then as we go through 3 to 5, we're going to be getting a little bit more closer to getting into the code. For 3, we're going to be talking about use cases. And then 4 and 5, we're actually going to have some technical workshops where we're going to work through some of the things that you can build with account abstraction. So that is the 5 episodes that we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing them every other Thursday, starting today, same time. So this week we have it today, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll do the same thing next 2 Thursdays from now, and then the same thing for every 2 Thursdays for 5 Thursdays. So yeah, why account abstraction? This is something that I think we need to talk about from the high level. So the way that I like to explain account abstraction to people, and this is something that I've been really trying to think about a lot lately, is that account abstraction is really full flexibility at the account level, right? And so what do I mean by that? So smart contracts provide us full flexibility in the EVM ecosystem, right? They give us the ability to program whatever we want inside of a smart contract. They are programmed built on the blockchain. Of course, a blockchain is a constrained environment, right? So that means you can only really compute as much as a block allows you to, right? There are gas limits, but within those gas limits, a smart contract gives you full flexibility to do whatever you want. So why do I say that account abstraction gives us full flexibility? The reason why account abstraction gives us full flexibility as opposed to what we have today is in most EVM ecosystems today, there's sort of this thing that has to happen for every transaction on an EVM ecosystem, which is that an externally owned account has to sign a transaction and send it to a blockchain node. Now, for those of you who have spent some time in the Web3 ecosystem, if you're a developer, you probably know what an externally owned account is, but I want to define it a little bit first. So there's this concept of an externally owned account, which is a private public key pair, and a private key is a 32-byte it's a 32-byte piece of code that you use to basically sign transactions and send them on chain. This 32-byte set of data you need to keep private, right? You need to store somewhere. And the best crypto users, the real power crypto users, have figured out ways to store this really, really securely, right? And this is a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to expect of most users. Honestly, for myself, someone who's been around in crypto for quite some time now, I still don't feel super comfortable with storing my own private keys. It's something that you have to think about a lot. And like, you want to think about the redundancy of where you're storing your private keys, like what is the best secure practices for doing that? Whereas smart contracts give us a lot more flexibility in that regard. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. So these externally owned accounts, you have a private key, and what you do is you sign a transaction. And a transaction is going to be something like, I'm trying to send this ether to this person, or I am trying to interact with this smart contract, and here is the method that I'm targeting with these particular arguments. So you sign this transaction and it creates a signature, and the signature goes to a blockchain node, and a blockchain node is going to take that signature and it's going to do something called an elliptic curve recover, where it's going to take the signature and come up with an address that you control with that private key. So to dial this back to somebody who might be a little less technical, if you've used something like MetaMask or a mobile wallet or even a hardware wallet, you are protecting a private key at its core, right? And when you sign something, you send a signature through to the blockchain node that's going to recover an address that you control with that private key. Now, that address needs to also contain some ether inside of it, because when you sign a transaction and you send it to a blockchain node, that transaction has to pay for gas upfront, right? And the reason it has to pay for gas upfront is because we talked about this idea that a blockchain is a constrained environment where you have to pay for compute costs upfront. So all this leads to a lot of inflexibility. And again, I mentioned account abstraction is all about account flexibility. We want to make it so that you have the full flexibility to do whatever kind of user experience your dApp needs for the users that you're trying to onboard, right? What is the inflexibility that I just talked about a moment ago? With an EOA, when you want to sign a transaction and send it onto a blockchain, you only have one type of cryptography that you can use, right? Within typical EVM ecosystems, which is that you can use the SECP 256K1 curve, which is a type of elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, to sign the transaction and have it recovered on chain. One of the things that account abstraction wants to do is abstract this signature so that we can use any type of cryptography that we want to use, maybe even aggregated signatures. We could use things like a different type of elliptic curve that is used for passkeys specifically. So we want to unlock new ways to be able to do these signatures, which is going to unlock new user experiences. The other thing that's really inflexible about what I just described is that with an externally owned account, you can technically have a smart contract that you could consider as your account. As a user, you could say, I have a smart contract and this is something that I want to use as my account. But the problem is, with the externally owned account and a smart contract, you now have two addresses that you need to manage, right? You need to manage this externally owned account that's signing transactions against a smart contract. So to tell a user that is something that's really hard to do, right? For crypto power users, a lot of users have already used things like Gnosis Safe, Argent smart wallets, to be able to do these sorts of things where you manage a smart contract from externally owned accounts. But for your average user, especially the next million, next billion users that are going to be onboarded onto Web3, this is something that's really hard to do, is to explain to them, you have two addresses, one that needs to have gas inside of it, one that's going to be your main account. That's a really hard thing to do, especially in the context of a decentralized application when you're just trying to get users to use your app, right? So this is something that we want to unlock with account abstraction, is this flexibility for new user experiences. And the third thing that I want to mention that's in flexibility in that scheme is the possibility of sponsoring somebody's gas so they don't have to pay for gas themselves. So making it so that we can abstract away the gas payment itself, or maybe allow them to use something else to pay for gas. Maybe the user really likes the things that Web3 gives them, but they are not bought in on speculating on cryptocurrencies. So what they want to do is they want to be able to use, like, let's say, a stable coin to pay for gas on a transaction. And this user could potentially do that with account abstraction. Or if you have a dApp that you want to pay for your users gas because you just want them to be able to click a button, and then that button is going to launch a blockchain transaction on the back end, and really use the blockchain like a public database where users can just write to it, right? You have some sort of a way to be able to make that possible for the user. That's something that account abstraction unlocks. So really, we're going to just see a ton of explosion in the user experience department because of account abstraction. It gives us this full flexibility that a smart contract would have, but baked into what the user can actually think about as their account. So we could do things like compartmentalize our account, so we can like bake in security by programming it in. We could have a smart contract account where we say that this NFT is an NFT that I don't want to ever sell, but this is one that I do want to be able to transfer to someone else. These types of things you could program in with a smart contract account, as opposed to an externally owned account, which is something that you need to only adhere to this very specific type of signature scheme that I described a moment ago.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm super excited for this because, as you mentioned, this could help onboard the next billion of users. And yeah, to be honest, so some things that are already happening in Web3, like all those procedures you have to follow is hard. Like and for normal, well, not normal, just maybe for new people is harder to follow. So yeah, this is super exciting to see. And what do you think? Like, why do we need uh, account abstractions for smart accounts?
Yeah, so this is something that's really interesting about account abstraction, is it's not necessary for everything that we're talking about with account abstraction to unlock these things that I just talked about, like the gas abstraction, so you could pay for a user, or these new types of, or being able to use a smart contract account for your wallet. Like, these things already exist with some of the pioneers that are out there, like Gnosis Safe and Argent Wallet. The thing that account abstraction really does is it's a standard for everything that we're talking about here, right? So this ability to be able to standardize, really be able to have like everyone focused around what just one standard for what account abstraction is doing. And if we think about standards, it's really important to think about things like ERC20 and the NFT standard, which have unlocked all of the different use cases that we had in the previous bull run. So if you think about things like for Ethereum, the bull runs, the use cases that have really been unlocked are things like ICOs, NFTs, and DeFi, right? Without NFT and token standards, we would not be able to have those exciting use cases, right? Without ERC20, for example, you wouldn't have something like Uniswap, where Uniswap launched a smart contract, right? Hayden was able to put out this smart contract that users could list their token inside of Uniswap, because Uniswap knows that at the end of the day, this token is something that it can talk to with these specific methods using the ERC20 standard, right? So account abstraction, what it does is it really unites all these efforts to get these features that I talked about a moment ago under a common name, and more importantly, a common standard, right? And there's a couple different standards that we could talk about that account abstraction unite under. Some of the things that, so like 4337 is going to be account abstraction without protocol changes, but there's also account abstraction with protocol changes that we can get into as well, and we will definitely get into in the more technical episodes. So one other thing that I like to think about in terms of account abstraction that's super interesting is the timing is ripe for it now, right? Account abstraction has actually been around for a while. I know that Vitalik like put up EIP 86 like maybe in like 2017 or something like that. I think that's like the first proposal on account abstraction where we get some of these features, but we're really only starting to see these things sprout up now. We're really starting to see in the last year a lot of use around account abstraction, especially in ERC 4337. And the reason is, I think, twofold. One is that, like, if you think about the bull run in 2020, like DeFi, right, where we had DeFi as a big use case, when you were using something like Uniswap and gas transaction fees got really, really high, it may have cost you like $20 to make a swap on Uniswap. There was nobody out there thinking like, oh, it would be a good idea to sponsor that person's payment so it's easier for them to use Uniswap, right? That $20 payment is just something that is just so expensive that it doesn't really make sense to sponsor users' payments. But today, transaction fees are getting much, much lower thanks to folks like Arbitrum. And I think Austin can speak to a lot more of the technology that Arbitrum is pioneering here, that we are seeing transaction fees get lower and lower and lower to the point where they can actually become like sort of like customer acquisition costs. You can think of it like that, where you could say, I want to onboard this user and I am willing to sponsor their gas, right? I'm willing to sponsor their gas for X number of transactions, maybe all of their transactions on my dApp. I think it's really use case specific. And I think that's something really important to think about is the timing. We also were used to a different type of user in previous bull runs for Ethereum and EVM ecosystems, where the previous users were power crypto users, right? Who are willing to take a private key, to store that private key somewhere, to think about all the security ramifications behind keeping a private key somewhere, and actually making those signatures on chain. They were willing to do that user friction of all the things that they need to do to be able to interact with all these DeFi protocols. I think the next million, the next billion users are going to be a set of users that are more mainstream. They're a set of users who need to think about, who are going to be concerned with that user friction. We want to be able to onboard users without the first thing they see is a 32 word mnemonic and say, you need to store this thing forever, this private key forever. And if you ever lose it, all your funds are compromised, things like that. We need to give them better user experience. And this is what account abstraction really unlocks, is that flexibility at the account layer for the mainstream user.
Super exciting to see. And you mentioned these standards. Can you walk us more through that? Like, what are the standards that account abstraction has? Like,
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in and speak to that. There's the current state of play is that, as Dan mentioned, the concept of account abstraction has been around for a while, but it's really taken off in the past year. And internally, we track around 20 standards within the EVM ecosystem alone that have been taking on bits and pieces of it. Because if you think about it, the flip side to all the flexibility that Dan talked about is a lot of complexity. And so it's kind of normal. You would expect to see a lot of standards proliferating as people try and figure out how to experiment and then settle on the right thing without getting locked in too early. And so Dan mentioned ERC 4337. I think one of the most interesting follow-ons to that, and one that's probably very relevant to your developers at Arbitrum, is RIP 7560, which is an attempt to say, all right, ERC 4337 created a lot of complexity. It raised gas costs. It did things like impose some unique structures that require some updating across lots of different layer 2 projects across the EVM ecosystem. So perhaps there's a way to standardize all of this so that individual protocols can build it into their layer 2 protocol. And so hopefully, if the community adopts it and if it's sufficiently robust, that would go a long way towards standardizing some of this and making it easier for people. I will say Arbitrum's been very pioneering in terms of doing a lot of this work ahead of that. So one of your first governance protocols, or one of your first governance proposals, was AIP2, right? Which was specifically setting up one of these RPC endpoints. And so which is amazing, but also, one of the things that gets mentioned by the authors of 7560 is maybe every single protocol shouldn't have to do that, right? Maybe there should be a way to enshrine this so that there's not all this fragmentation of effort. There's another sort of stream of proposals, and I'm it's near and dear to my heart because I work on it. So, but I think it's relevant here, which is 6900, which is a standard for building in modularity and making and standardizing interfaces. And there are several competing standards for that as well. But the reason modularity is important, to go back to Dan's earlier point about flexibility, as a developer, if you want to build in different kinds of flexibility, maybe it's not optimal for you to be locked into one single vendor or one single approach or one single standard. You should be able to mix and match. And this kind of modularity is something we're obviously seeing across the entire ecosystem and across the stack. So it's natural to think that it would be coming to account abstraction as well.
Amazing, thank you, Jason. It was very cool to get to know more about these standards, and yeah, you also mentioned the proposal in the Arbitrum DAO for these upgrades. It's super fun because this happened like 8 months ago, but feels like it was ages ago. But yeah, cool to see this. And yeah, Austin, I would like to ask you as well, like, what is the state of account abstraction in Arbitrum today? Maybe you can share more about it.
Yeah, definitely happy to. So account abstraction is definitely in its early stages of adoption right now. I don't think anyone would dispute that. We're very early on this kind of adoption curve that we all expect to see. And in terms of like proliferating that adoption, I think we've seen a lot of great infrastructure be put in place so that when these kind of apps come around to adopting the technology and the users come around to adopting these like account abstraction wallets, the technology is ready. And so I think like from a baseline level on Arbitrum, the infrastructure is in place. Like there are many bundlers and paymasters and smart accounts and just like the entry points that are all fully deployed and functional on Arbitrum. The like optionality for developers has never been higher, which has just like been really great to see. And Alchemy has played a big role in getting that optionality onto the chains as well. So that's number one. The infrastructure is in place. Developers have optionality, and apps and users are really like ready to adopt it. Number two, which Jason mentioned earlier, was Arbitrum and Offchain Labs is like very supportive of ERC 4337, which is a standard for account abstraction. And one of the first AIPs, Arbitrum Improvement Proposals, was to actually make the experience for supporting ERC 4337 better. And so to kind of shed some light on the kind of transaction flow when someone is using a, say, like account abstraction wallet, is that smart accounts are not really able to submit transactions the same way as an EOA. And so these kind of account abstraction transactions, which people refer to as user operations, get sent to a separate mempool than like normal transactions sent from a EOA. Then these entities called bundlers will take these user operations and actually initiate those normal transactions into the normal mempool on behalf of the users. And one of the jobs of the bundler is to validate that these user operations are going to be successful and are formatted correctly and have all of the right parameters. And this, is not that easy. And so one of the changes we made with AIP2 is to make this process a little bit easier and put some more checks in place that bundlers have access to have more confidence that the user operations that they're going to initiate on behalf of users are going to successfully execute. That is like a long way of saying that this proposal makes it easier and more profitable to run a bundler on Arbitrum. So that's like just one example of how like Arbitrum and really the community has kind of pushed forward ERC 4337 as like the account abstraction standard on the chain. I think there's a lot of promising apps and adoption that we've seen as almost like a taste of what real adoption will look like. One example is this game called ZTX. They have a very large audience in Web 2. And one thing that they did was they gave everybody a free NFT to their Web 2 audience in a way that completely abstracted away the blockchain. So the users who really did not have to be crypto native at all essentially saw that a digital asset was being given to them that they can use in game at a later time. And they logged on with their social account and claimed their digital asset. That's all the user was exposed to. But on the back end, when they were claiming that NFT, it was a smart account, and an ERC 4337 smart account was being created, and the user was claiming their NFT that was stored into their wallet. The account growth from this one like simple NFT drop to a Web2 audience created more smart accounts than like months and months of account abstraction smart account growth combined. And so that's really just like almost an early example. I think we'll look back on that date as just like one example of really what account abstraction adoption can look like. And you can completely abstract away the blockchain experience from users and give them something that feels comfortable and familiar. So yeah, the future of account abstraction is definitely exciting on Arbitrum.
Well, that was an amazing example, like how CTX made it to onboard around 2000K new users in a day. That's huge, and with account abstraction, that's amazing. So yeah, this is a great time for you to join these episodes. Remember, we are going to have 5 of them every Thursday. So yeah, a great timing for you to learn more about it. And yeah, Austin, I would like to ask you, like, which use cases? What can Arbitrum provide to make account abstraction better, or what is doing now to improve it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a few ways that Arbitrum can contribute to the adoption of account abstraction, and a few of these ways aren't necessarily have a direct relationship, but are tangential. One example of this is Arbitrum Orbit, which is the permissionless path to launching a new chain, whether that be an app chain or a general purpose chain or a customized chain. People can make modifications to these chains to make account abstraction much simpler and even native to the chain. For example, Dan mentioned earlier about these different signature schemes that EOAs and smart accounts use. Well, one of the kind of speed bumps to account abstraction adoption is that these alternative signature schemes are very expensive to verify because they are not included as a precompile natively to Ethereum. However, what you can customize with your own Orbit chain are precompiles. So for some of these alternate signature schemes that someone would like to verify cheaply, and this really unlocks just like a new level of just like user experience. You could, for example, have your private key secured by Face ID on your iPhone or Touch ID on your laptop. You could include a custom precompile on your chain to make that like arbitrarily cheap. And so that's one example of how Arbitrum Orbit may, be almost like experimental ground for account abstraction adoption. Another thing you can do is we've been talking about standards. There's been a couple of proposals to adopt account abstraction natively to the chain. And there's a few different approaches to this, whether it be like making EOAs more similar to smart accounts, or giving just like getting rid of EOAs in full and making smart accounts the default. You can take one of these approaches and just apply it to your Orbit chain. And then at that point, you have unlocked native account abstraction on an EVM compatible chain. And so Arbitrum Orbit is definitely like one of those ways of how Arbitrum is building technology that can foster the adoption of account abstraction. Another example is Stylus. And so Stylus allows developers to write smart contracts in popular programming languages such as Rust and C and C++. And one of the kind of use cases of Stylus is not only does it open up accessibility, but it also makes computation and memory just like orders of magnitude cheaper because of the efficiencies you gain of these like alternate programming languages that ultimately compile down to WebAssembly. And so a lot of these things that and features that people are trying to do with account abstraction are computationally intense. And so if you can rewrite those in Rust or C, and some people, have already written plenty of libraries in these other languages, you can pull from, deploy on chain in a way that's fully interoperable with the EVM, and reap all of these efficiency gains that can be used for account abstraction wallets. And then lastly, I think as Jason mentioned earlier, there have been proposals to adopt account abstraction natively on the kind of DAO governed chains, such as Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova. And there's a few different paths to this. One, I think the ideal way being that like Ethereum adopts it first, and then all of the L2s can follow suit. But realistically, the quicker path to that is if many or all of the L2s can adopt account abstraction natively together as a standard, so that there isn't this fragmentation between the chains. And so I think that Offchain Labs is certainly in support of adopting native account abstraction at the L2 level, if we can get buy-in from the rest of the teams working on the chains. And so, like I said earlier, the future of account abstraction is really bright, not just for Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova, but for Arbitrum Orbit chains as well.
Huge. Thank you, Austin. And what do you think, like, what are the use cases that will benefit the most from account abstraction? Maybe this is an open question for everyone. What do you think about it? Maybe can we start with you, Jason?
Yeah, the use cases that will benefit the most. I will say it's natural, and we all spend a lot of our time thinking about things that, cases like the one Austin described, where there's a really magical user experience that's their first introduction to Web3. But it's also the case that there are a lot of interesting enterprise applications. And so, for example, there was one, Shell, the giant oil company, is integrating, has a pilot program to integrate blockchain into its supply chain, which is a use case we've been hearing about for years and is very great and exciting. But they're also using account abstraction to sort of deal with the last mile problem of people who need to enter the data in order for the blockchain to capture the data. And so you can imagine that you don't want those people getting hung up with friction around the wallet and gas payments and all those things. You just need to get the data in. So we can imagine there will be a lot of enterprise use cases that aren't even necessarily about a specific end user, but are looking more broadly. That'll turn it to Dan.
That makes a ton of sense, right? Like you have specific people that want to write to the blockchain for its public purposes, right? And then but you don't want them to have to deal with all these things. You just want them to be able to write to the blockchain and use it. It's like kind of like a database, right? We're getting to the point where it could just be a public database. I think that's what's exciting to me as like I come from like a web application development background. So like I've spent a lot of time building web applications, I guess maybe the last 12 years professionally. And so I identify really strongly with the people that are out there building decentralized applications. And I think something that really strikes me is just the user journey in general for Web3 applications. I think that across the use cases, they'll be very different, right? Like if you have a crypto power user that's using some sort of a DeFi app to get a collateralized loan, like maybe the best user experience there is a hardware wallet, right? Plug in a hardware wallet, use that, build your security. Maybe that's the way to go. Maybe they prefer the security that you would get with a smart contract wallet. I think for power users, there's sort of like this area of they need to be thinking of security first, but then you have like, and I think that there's still benefits there, of course, with account abstraction and some of the things that could be provided depending upon what those features are. But I think something that's really interesting to me is all these new use cases that we've been talking about for a long time that really haven't shined through in Web3 just yet. Like, I know I was, I went to the first Ethereum Denver back in 2018, and people were talking about these like crazy use cases for blockchain. And it was when I was like still trying to figure out what is this whole decentralization thing and like what are the things that we should be building on blockchains. And ideas were really floating around back then. And I think we kind of had a reality check where a lot of stuff was like, okay, this just does not work in a blockchain environment. And that's like what we've seen over the last few years. But now that transaction fees are getting much lower and we're starting to see user experience get better through account abstraction, I think we're starting to see a new boom in games and social, which are really exciting for me. And I think, Austin talked about this and Jason as well, like this invisible experience that a user can have coming into an application. And for the first time, they don't have to know that they're interacting with crypto. They could just start using it, right? And I think for like social and games, you don't want to have a user's first experience be buy something or store this private key away forever and don't lose it, right? Like that's not the first experience. Like most of the users, if you're going after a mainstream user in a game or a social app, most of your users want to try it out first. They want to see like, is this something that I want to incorporate into my life? Is this something that I want to get some, actually spend some time in, right? And so maybe if you're playing a game, like the other day I played Sunflower Lands. I thought that was really cool experience. I didn't know they created a smart contract wallet behind the scenes for me. I had to go looking for it, right? It's like they didn't even tell me, but I went and looked, and sure enough, I don't know whether the wallet got deployed or whether I had a counterfactual address, and we'll talk about that in episode 2, what that means. But in my address, there was an NFT already there, right? And I didn't know that was happening. I was playing a game. That's all I cared about. And for a user coming in, they want to start playing that game. They want to see, is this a game I want to play? And then maybe after they spent many, many hours in the game, they start to think, okay, now I really care about the stuff that I have in this game. How is this secured? Do I really own this stuff? Like, what are, what are the things that what kind of account do I have here with this game? What is my relationship with this game? At that point, I think that's the right time to get the user on the journey of securing their account. Thinking about things like, how can I upgrade my account? How can I pull in, like Jason was talking about modular accounts, this idea that you can pull in plugins for more security. So if you want to do like multi-signatures, so like maybe you have a hardware wallet and that hardware wallet is the only thing that can move your really important item. Maybe you have like a piece of land in a game and you don't want to ever sell it, but only under the very right conditions. So you store that away in like a secret hardware wallet that has like your best security practices baked in. But then the everyday stuff like your sunflower seeds or whatever they have in that game, like you want to be able to use around, you just keep that on a session key, right? And just let the browser sign it and do whatever. You just want to play the game, right? And I think that's what's really cool about account abstraction. Like I said, it's flexibility at the end of the day. It gives the dApp developer the ability to say, this is the experience I want to give my developer. And I think this is the right time for us to be able to unlock those experiences because, as usability is getting better and transaction fees are going down, we're going to see these Web3 use cases really shine through. So I'm super excited about that.
Cool. Yeah, and I think a lot of great use cases have been raised already, but just to add a couple more, I guess. I think the list is quite endless. One that is very related to just gas sponsorship and gaming especially is this idea of session keys, which essentially like just provide permissions to an app to basically make transactions on behalf of the user. And so you can imagine for a game that has like tons of on-chain transactions, that it's going to be annoying for the users to have to individually go and approve and execute each of these transactions. If the game can do it in the background, you're still building on top of the like your on-chain like activity graph and composability, and these are things that you want to build up, especially like with the kind of like layers and layers of applications being built on top of this on-chain data, in a way that's like hidden or abstracted away from the user. And so session keys is a huge boost to user experience. The other side to that, though, is now that you've given permissions to some of these entities, and maybe you're giving permissions to some of these other entities, not just for session keys, but for social recovery, and like just multi-party computation. Maybe one day you don't trust those entities anymore. And the great thing that smart accounts give you flexibility for is the ability to revoke those permissions from these entities in a way that's on-chain and deterministic. And so it really just gives more agency to the user to make decisions that are in the best interest of their safety and security. So that's where I see like not only is it a user experience benefit, but it's also a security benefit if used correctly.
Yeah, amazing. I totally agree with you, and yeah, totally excites me as well of all everything what's happening and all the improvements we are going to see, and all the projects as well that will be implementing account abstraction, and for sure the community that will be the most benefited from it. And yeah, cool. And we also, like, as we mentioned in the beginning of the workshop of today, this is a series of workshops that we are going to have. This is the first one, but we are going to have 5 of them. And yeah, next week we have another one on Thursday. And I want to know if we can share some alpha to our Arbinauts today. Like, what are we going to see for the next workshop for episode number 2?
Always got to share the alpha. Yeah, I also want to. I do also. Something really resonated with me what Austin said as well, which is that like this idea that you could like upgrade your account. Something that's like super frustrating to me as like somebody who's been a user of Ethereum and EVM ecosystems since like 2017 is I still have like externally owned accounts that have like a lot of non-transferable tokens on them. Like POAPs got really really big at one point, and like there's a lot of activity on those accounts. It's really frustrating now that like I just can't upgrade those, right? Like I can move the assets unless they're non-transferable, but I can't upgrade them, right? So big thing with account abstraction that I really want to see is people not being stuck in my problem who come into Web3 later on, right? They could do things like upgrade the security, like what Austin was saying. I think we got to save users from being stuck on a private key, right? That's a big thing. Yeah, so sharing alpha for the next episode. I did see a lot of questions in chat here. I think, yeah, we should close up here, but I think a lot of your questions will get answered in the next episode. Like people are asking about multi-sig wallets and like how they relate to account abstraction, and just maybe some more confusion around the private keys and like where the private keys are being held. What we're going to be talking about in the next episode is ERC 4337, which has really been driving a lot of the adoption of user operations and account abstraction today and over the last year. This is predominantly because we can start using it today because it's built into smart contracts. It does not require core protocol changes. Austin mentioned this earlier, that it's difficult to get core protocol changes into Ethereum, right? There's a lot of things that Ethereum needs to be focused on. And there's a lot that needs to be considered to get these things into the core protocol. So 4337, what it really unlocks is account abstraction through smart contracts. So we can actually build all the features that we talked about earlier through smart contracts that kind of extend the protocol rules in a really interesting way. We're going to talk about how that works exactly. So I think it'll answer a lot of these questions. We're also going to talk more about ERC 6900, which is a standard that Jason talked about, and some of these modular accounts, what it means to install a plugin so that you can extend your account when you realize that you need to add more security to it, or you need to interact with tokens in some novel way, or you want to subscribe to a smart contract, right? Maybe it could take out $10 from your smart account every month so that you have a subscription to Netflix on chain. I don't know, right? Like there's all kinds of things that we could do with those standards. So next episode is all going to be about standards. We're going to get more into the technicals. So super excited for that. And hope you guys tune in and hope you enjoyed this episode.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, looking forward for that one. And yeah, I'm sure everyone here, we're going to share the link for the next one. But yeah, you can activate the notifications to receive those. And yeah, we have, as you mentioned, we have some questions in the chat. Wondering if you would like to go to those. Well, the first question was, could multi-sig wallets can be replaced by account abstraction? And you shared. You want to share more about it, or?
Yeah, I think so. Jason, you unmuted too. Did you have a?
No, go for it. I'll jump in after.
So I honestly, I don't think it's on me to decide what gets replaced with what. I mean, these things are different options, right? I mean, this is, what I'm talking about with account abstraction is more flexibility for the user at the end of the day. There are some problems with like just the accounts, even as I'm talking about them, right? This isn't the end solution. There's still a conversation to be had. As Jason's talking about, there's all kinds of standards in the industry. We're still on this area where we need to discover what the best user experience is. So I do think that multi-sig wallets still have their purpose. I think that you will see users who have multi-owners on their smart contract accounts. And I think that has its own purpose as well. Maybe that's like social recovery baked into your wallet. I think that, from my top of my head, people may disagree with me, but I feel like multi-sig wallets will still be the main thing for like when you have multiple persons controlling a contract, right? I think that still makes the most sense. Whereas like when you think of a multi-owner for a smart contract wallet, that's probably you managing multiple keys or multiple ways to validate transactions against your smart contract wallet. But I think that really ends up depending upon the user experience at the end of the day. I haven't really thought through all of that. I think that's really where, I'm talking about account abstraction gives you more flexibility. If you're a dApp developer out there, you really get to decide the fate here, right? You get to decide what the best user experience is going to be, make it, and then if users start adopting it, I mean, that's what ends up being adopted, right?
Yeah.
kind of dodging the question. There's all kinds of different ways that you could do this stuff, right? But I think we need this flexibility at the end of the day.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Dan's comments, as he mentioned, you can do multiple owners for a smart contract account. So it may be a distinction without a difference to say that they'll replace multi-sig. It's just a different flavor of it, but it's not constrained to that.
Fantastic. Thank you for the question. And there is another question that is, the smart contract issuer will be holding the user's private keys?
Yeah, so smart contract issuer. This one will definitely get answered in the next episode. So the smart contract issuer in this, I'm trying to think of the word issuer.
The short
like
answer is no. Like smart accounts are self-custodial.
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, I think that's good there.
Good, fantastic. And there is another one. ERC 4337 takes into account breaching layer from layer 1 to layer 2.
I can take this one in that like it's really going to be up to the bridge UI that you're using. And so like there's nothing about the bridge itself that is stopping account abstraction wallets or 4337 wallets from bridging from L1 to L2. It's really just about the interface that the user is exposed to on whether they support that account abstraction wallet. And I can say that like the Arbitrum bridge does support account abstraction wallets for ETH transfers, and so there's a little bit complexity here with like the cross-chain nature of smart contract accounts. But yes, like if you have assets held on L1 in a smart account or a multi-sig, you will be able to bridge from L1 to L2.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin, for answering that one. And there is another question. What kind of efforts are going on to reduce gas fees on account abstraction? And also Austin answered that is 4844 is coming to reduce gas fees, the proto-dank sharding, the famous blobs. I think are coming in March. I don't remember
The
something
blob.
around that. Yeah. Yeah, many exciting.
There's been some great work done by teams within the ecosystem to actually reduce the fees of account creation and user ops submission. So the account abstraction is certainly a team effort, and I think we're all working to expand the pie there.
Yeah, we should also mention the idea of like compression, right? So this is something that people are looking into where you could potentially encode the user operation in such a way that the account can interpret it a little bit differently so you don't have to send as much call data, things like that. It's definitely something that's being mitigated. I think Austin talked about some of the efforts here as well with precompiles, right? Precompiles on signatures is also reducing gas. So at the end of the day, I think we'll strike the right balance here between user experience and gas, and the blobs are coming.
The famous blobs. Amazing. Very exciting to see. And the last question, can account abstraction help with composability?
That's a big question, because composability is one of those sort of things that operates at multiple scales, right? So I would say that it may in the long term, it's kind of hard to see from this point. So, stranger things have happened, but I will say that the focus on modularity is trying to get at that from a different perspective in terms of being able to standardize across applications and plugins. So there is a lot of attention being paid to composability in that sense.
Yeah, I kind of see this question in two ways, right? Like you have composability of the accounts, right? So if you're talking about composability of the accounts, we can sort of get that within the account space itself. As far as like composability outside of the account, like you could just think of account abstraction as basically providing flexibility and room up into the point where you are making state changes, right? Previously, you were just making state changes by encoding that in a transaction from an EOA and then making those state changes on chain. And then now you're sort of doing that through like this account abstraction, maybe a new transaction that's baked into the native protocol, or maybe through 4337, you're doing it through a smart contract wallet on chain. So it's going to like start to call data off at that point. So we're really like innovating on the account layer before you start making that change. So I think, yeah, if you're talking about complex, if you're talking about it in terms of like smart contracts that the accounts are going to be interacting with, I would say that like they could do anything like an EOA would be able to do, such that you could just send call data from a smart contract wallet just as much as you would with an EOA today.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think just to like finish that point off in that like the vision for account abstraction is to onboard, millions of new users and make the experience closer to what people are familiar with outside of crypto. And if we're able to succeed at that, like the on-chain graph of activity and data to compose with is only going to grow.
And it's a great moment for you to keep learning about it. That's why, we are inviting you to join to our next episode. It's going to be the next Thursday. And I don't know if you, Dan, or Jason, you're going to be, or Austin. Do you know who's hosting this one?
I think Austin and I will definitely be back. We gotta iron it out and get back to you on it. But we will definitely be having a super exciting episode. In the meantime, also I want to give out some resources for you guys to check out too. If you're ready to build today, don't wait for 2 weeks from now to learn about 4337. Go to the Alchemy YouTube. If you want to learn more about 4337, I just put out a series from the Alchemy YouTube channel where we go through building a paymaster, a smart account, and interacting with the entry point on a low level so you can really understand it. So it's all from scratch. And then we deploy that through a bundler on Arbitrum Sepolia. So definitely check that out. That's a great series to learn more. And then if you're ready to start building today, you understand this stuff super well, and you just want to get started, you want to build these user experiences we talked about, check out the Alchemy account kit. The documentation there is great. It's an awesome way to learn, but also an awesome way to just get onboarded and getting going. Deploy your dApps to Arbitrum today and get some user apps going, get some new user experiences built in. Be excited to see what you build. Tag us and let us know. We want to hear from your users.
Amazing, fantastic. Thank you, Dan, for sharing that. And yeah, definitely see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a great beginning of this series. Thank you very much, Jason, Dan, and Austin. And yeah, this is going to stay recorded for everyone that want to re-listen or rewatch this one. And yeah, see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
Ciao.